On this episode of the AVB Podcast, back here in the hometown of Windsor, Ontario, this time with Mr. Luke Heney. How's it going, brother?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. It's nice to sit down with you. I met you once before in person at Blues Fest.
That's right. Yeah.
And aside from that, I know of you because I've seen your work. But most recently, I know you for the same reason that probably most of the people in the area know you as you're the fucking bridge guy.
Yeah. bridge guy or bridge boy, I think people said. Yeah.
So, I mean, we will get into all of that because
Cool.
that's, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about all of that stuff, but let's start with you the same way we start with everybody else. I want to know a little bit of your background. I want to know about the house you grew up in, where you were born and raised, mom and dad, brothers and sisters, all of that stuff.
Cool. All the fun stuff. So I actually grew up in, I was born in Perth, so between Kingston and Ottawa. And I grew up in the middle of nowhere. Like literally the town was 100 people. And so my childhood, I had an amazing life. Like my parents are still together. They're very invested in us in terms of wanting us to achieve our potential in life. I have a younger brother and two younger sisters, so I was the oldest. Lately, I've been setting some really good examples for them. So, but no, we were allowed to just run free like our whole childhood. We were always on the water, out in the woods. And so music and that was always a huge part of that. My parents always had us in music lessons and sports. And I started with piano and I hated it. I had horrible teachers. And so I throughout, I'd say about grade 7 and 8 and through high school, focused mainly on sports. And so that was my background was in like football and hockey and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so from there, we ended up moving to Kingston. My dad took a job there, and when we moved to Kingston, I started to get a lot more interested in playing guitar. I grew up around church. We were always in church, and so I started playing with. Like,
You're a church kid?
I'm a church kid.
All
yeah.
right, okay.
That was my background, and that's
Wait a second. Something
Yeah.
else is involved in that a little bit. You said Kingston.
Yeah.
So Kingston is it's a political town.
It's very political. It's very artsy, but it's also very public sector when it comes to business. But it's across the board. It's a really unique town. It's beautiful.
So what brought Dad there is, I guess, my question.
Yeah, so he was always in finance.
Okay.
And so there was a company based out of Europe that he was a controller there. So he took an executive position there, and they relocated all of us there.
Okay, so he wasn't in politics or involved with.
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. No politics in my family.
That's sort of interesting because it kind of puts you on the outside in that city, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you feel that?
A little bit. It was weird. Yes and no, because when I growing up, my brother was my best friend, and so like our family was always real close.
Okay.
And so we kind of had like our thing going on like internally, and we were just like we were given the opportunity to do a lot of stuff. So I never really felt like I was out of something or.
So you weren't looking for connections that way.
Not really.
Okay.
No, and it was always like I can't say I ever really struggled making friends, I guess. So it was always easy wherever we were to like kind of engage with people. And my parents were always very out in the community in the sense
Okay.
of like wanting to like volunteer or be parts of things, and so that helped for sure.
That was a thing that they did, but was that a thing that they sort of instilled in you as well?
Yeah, I would think so. Like when it got to the point where I saw that I could give some type of value back to like youth group stuff, so like playing in bands and stuff around church stuff, that made me want to do that. And so obviously that stuff's never paid, especially around here. So it was hours and hours invested into like playing in bands, and which is really cool because like kids that grow up in that, you get exposed to things that you wouldn't get to in terms of like equipment and the ability to play on stages you typically wouldn't if you were starting out, in the bar scene or whatever.
Mhm.
So I'm very grateful for that. I've seen, not to get too in depth with it, but I've seen church help people really well, and I've seen it destroy people. So where I stand on that now is I'm very much more open-minded, I think, than I was throughout my teens and my early 20s.
Were you like a church kid? Like, was that like a thing that you sort of held on to?
I respected my parents in the sense of their beliefs, and I tried to uphold values that were close to them. But they were very good at letting us figure out our stuff. They were ones that let us fail and let us go out and try crazy stuff. Like we had many times where police would show up at the house.
Really?
Not for crazy stuff. Like
Right.
there were some times where like I got in a bit of trouble, as you do when you're a teenager.
I don't know, man. I was an asshole kid. I managed to avoid the cops
Did
my
you really?
entire life. Yeah.
Ours was mainly, we grew up on the lake, and ours was this thing where we wakeboard. We competitively wakeboarded when we were teenagers.
Right.
And the people on the lake didn't like our boat and the fact that we were like throwing these monster wakes. So
Right.
every time that somebody would show up, it usually had something to do with either we built a new rail in the lake, so we were like building stuff in the water,
Right.
and so we were causing like obstructions, I guess. But it was nice because I also lifeguarded, so I knew all of the like city councilors of the small town that we lived in just outside Kingston. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I was never charged for anything.
That'll.
Yeah.
I think those stories will come into play
Yeah,
later.
the bridge was my first offense that was like an actual thing. So.
So I'm just sort of I'm trying to get a grasp on this because it's interesting to me because you seem to come from a place that comes from like there's boundaries that are being set, but those boundaries are sort of like loose.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. There were like known things of like what to stick within, like boundary lines, I guess, rather than rigid boxes. But that's the thing. Like my parents always encouraged us to do like the things that we love to do, and so they gave us the freedom to mess up and the freedom to fail, and then the correction that went with that. Like it was consistency. There was consistent. Like I knew if I was to do something that was out, like when I was a kid growing up, and I did something that was outside of those, I knew there would be corrective action, but it was always consistent. It was never like, oh my gosh, I'm like something that didn't line up with something from the past. If that makes any sense.
It's funny. It's just because I'm in my head, I'm lining stuff up, and I should probably stop. I should probably stop doing that. But it's funny because it kind of fuck it. Let's just get into it. It sort of plays into how all of this stuff with the bridge develops, right? And it's funny because I ask these questions all of the time, always looking for like these loose connections, but like there's a direct connection here. Like this is we're talking about some pretty like A-B shit here.
Yeah. And like even so through like when I left high school, I just wanted to do like at the tail end of high school and all through like the years up until about 23, 24, all I wanted to do was music. And so I lived in Sydney, Australia for a couple of years. I went and did a music degree over there, but I dropped out after 6 months and realized that what I was learning really had no applicable value long term to what I could do. Like I could start a band tomorrow and do the same stuff. And so when I moved back to Canada, actually, my ex-wife and I, we started like a duo. We were like we did an acoustic EP. We did 11 songs, and then we would like play around. And I was totally naive and ignorant to what it took to market a project. I've probably written 300, 400 songs in my life, like easily, but I had no idea of the back end of how to go about that. And so I realized, hey, I would love to do music, so I'm going to start a business so I can focus more time on music. And when I did that, I never did music ever again for years. There were times where I didn't even pick up a guitar in a year, between like 24 to 29, 30. And so with that, it was like the recognition of in those years from 23, let's say 24 to now, my role was more in marketing, and I was able to glean a lot of skills from that, I think, of ways to then make 1988 a lot better.
Okay, so talk to me about that transition because it's interesting. I know very, very few other people that have made such a very specific turn because the story is very similar to mine because I was into music early on for a long time and then made my transition into the marketing side for a long time.
Okay.
So I'm interested your movement from the music to the marketing end.
Yeah.
You weren't trying to learn a piece to add to it. You were getting the fuck away from music.
I was
staying as close to it as you could.
Correct. It was out of necessity. So being from Kingston in those years, I moved to Windsor. And when I moved to Windsor, the company I was with decided not to open the office that was planned to open here. And so I'd already committed to Windsor. And so I needed to start something out of necessity. And so with that, I started my first business, and it was like, how can I build this up real quick so I can focus more time on music? And it took way longer than I thought to get to a point of sustainability where I wasn't going to lose my house and like all the stuff that comes with taking the leap of faith of starting something, right? Because there's so many unknowns, there's so many wild cards with that.
Talk to me about that process because you're coming into a new town, you don't really know anybody. So what is it that you put your focus into?
Yeah, so I love Windsor. I think it's an amazing city, and I came at a time when everyone was moving out. Like it was talked about so poorly everywhere else in Ontario.
When did you guys move?
2011.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So it was right after the big crash.
Right.
And everyone's like going to Toronto, going to Hamilton,
Mhm.
going out west. And I looked at it as opportunity. Like Kingston, from a real estate perspective, you got Kingston, which is 300,000 for like your entry level burbs home, and then down by the downtown, you're looking at like $750,000 for a really shitty like university rental.
Mhm.
And so here, moving here is like you can buy a house for $60,000. And
You could then.
and it backs on it. Yeah, back then that was amazing. It was like, you know what, this seems like a land of opportunity. It's it's blue collar, but you can work hard and live a white collar lifestyle. And so that was kind of the draw and the appeal to Windsor. And it was like taking that thing of like everybody says it's shit, but like you just own it as like, no, we're gonna make it work kind of thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was the transition.
So, but talk to me about how you sort of like got your foothold here in the city.
Yeah, it took a long time. It was literally move here and just try to meet as many people as we could at the time, and that was when I was married to my ex-wife. And it was like it was just go out and meet as many people as possible, go to every gala, go to every event that we could, invite people over. We would take every time we were here, we'd take a new route. Like even if we knew where we were going, like we had to go to the grocery store, we would drive specifically different routes just to learn about the city and just to like figure it out.
It's funny because what I keep going back to in my head is like clearly you learned that from somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I wonder how much, like, I assume it comes from your parents and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that is related to the political side of living in Kingston.
Yeah, it very much could be very tied to that. Growing up in it, you don't really think from a bird's eye perspective on your life so much. I think you do that. You learn to do that when you're older, as you mature. But yeah, growing up in it, you're just going through life and kind of figuring stuff out. I'm 31 now, and I'm still like just figuring stuff out. Like I've gone through a lot of changes in the last 2.5 years, and I'm very grateful for everything, and I'm very like happy with the position I am in life right now, just perspective and all that. So yeah, but definitely it would have played in for sure.
So talk to me about so you build your business. Your life is developing how it develops here.
Yeah.
We said ex-wife, so we know something. So we know that part went down.
Yeah.
But so when did music start falling? Like start coming back in?
So it's interesting because one of the businesses that we'd started was a music school, and so I always had music around, and I know like the most talented people ever, like so much more talented when it comes to music than myself. And I've always been around those people, so I've always had the opportunity to interact with music and be around it. And that music school we took from a living room thing to, I would say I think it's the largest in the city right now in terms of a music school and what it offers. And so I have no involvement with that company now. But yeah, the draw for that was always exciting when we moved to the space that it is now, because we opened up to more than just piano. Originally, it was just piano lessons and a few teachers and a couple studios. And we moved to that space, and it was like we're doing, vocals and guitar, and there was a stage area. So I got to design and build that studio, and that was so exciting because it was like kind of back into music. I was like, well, maybe like if I'm not actually playing music, at least I have like a connection to it, and I have some like ability to have it in my life where I have direct impact on what's going on. And so from that, like ordering all the guitars, like I'm a huge Gretsch fan, so like we ordered a couple Gretsch guitars, a couple Gibsons, and we wanted to make it just a place that was like made you want to come into and create. And all the places we never had when we were growing up in music lessons, because typically you go to music schools, and not to bash them, but they're really shitty when it comes to creative vibe. And we wanted to create a space, even like the space here that I have the benefit of being in now, is somewhere you come in and you want to create. So yeah, that happened around 28, so 3 years ago, and I started writing again. That was the first time I'd written songs in like 6 years.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that sparked everything, and then opened up a lot of like perspective on my life and where I was at and what I was happy with and what I was happy with or not happy with moving forward. And
you said when you came away from music, you went into the marketing side, and like to get specific, you got into photography and videography.
Yeah, so I didn't go straight into videography and photography. I actually got hired on as a driver for a startup that I was their first hire, and it was an office supply company. And within the next about year and a half to 2 years, we opened 2 more offices, and we went from like 1 employee or 2 employees to like 40. And so I had like the
In
opportunity.
how long? Sorry?
Like 2 years.
Okay.
And so my role within like 2 months changed from driver to, I was doing sales while I was on the road. So I'm like delivering office products, but I'm also like calling, like trying to set up meetings with people. And so we were growing really quick. And so I moved on to, within like 2 months, like the business development manager. And so from that, we were like responsible for like the marketing side of things and logistics. And I got to see the whole workings of like something develop. And it was kind of like an MBA in like 2 years. I look at it like that. It was the most valuable experience of my life. And the people that invested in, to me, the owners of that company were hugely influential in first of all, my move to Windsor and the idea of starting something on my own.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's what ended up sending you here to Windsor, and then that company didn't end up opening
They're
up.
opening at Concord instead, and then
So did you end up, was videography and all that part of that transition, or did
no,
that
so
come?
that was really cool how that happened. So because we started the music school, and at the time I'd started like a shipping company, I needed to promote it somehow and like market it. And so we were like, well, what could we do? And so we bought a camera, and we're like, what if we do all of our in-house, like our own marketing, and run against Facebook was not that big, especially in smaller towns yet, like running ads on Facebook, Instagram, that type of thing. So we were like, why don't we do that? Because in the bigger cities it's working. And so we started doing that. And from that, we were able to grow out the media company. And so we would have, the nice thing about the music school was it catered to a lot of business owners in the community. It's a certain type of clientele typically that go into that space. And it was great to just network. We had 200 people that own 200 of the biggest businesses in Windsor, and so it was easy to get into those because they saw our work and they'd say, "Oh, who shot your promotion for this?" or "Who ran that? Who shot that?" And it was like, "Oh, we do it all in house." And so from there, we picked up our first client, which was the law office, and that was 2 years ago, almost like today. That was like the first one that was like a paid thing that started the media company. We were doing our own for years before that.
So talk to me about this idea.
1988.
Well, yeah. So give me the start of 1988, and then let's get into this marketing.
Yeah. Okay. So 1988, I had one song that was sitting there that I thought would be really cool, and so I called my friend Justin Dow, who did all the engineering on the project, up, and I said, "Hey man, I would love," and this was right at the time of when Lisa and I had split. I had a verse and a chorus, and I was like, I think it would be cool, and it was Crossfire that ended up being the single that we just released. And I was like, this could be pretty cool. I'd like to do it as a side project. And so we'd scheduled time like almost 2 years ago to do it, or about a year and a half. And just at the time of everything that was going on, I had to cancel all the studio sessions. And I was like, sorry, man, I'm not able to do it right now. So it was almost a full year later that I reached back out to him and said, hey, I'd love to do that project now. And so at that time, we started with a different song that we recorded first. And I was like, I just want to do 2 or 3 songs. Just for me personally, like I feel like I need to get back into this, and this would be a good kind of entry back into it. And so I found a couple other musicians. My buddy Josh, who I live with in Australia, he played all the guitars on the first song, well, most of them, and then Cody Williamson, the drummer. And so that's kind of what got back into it, was just reaching out to Justin and saying, hey, these are the songs. And then from there, as we were tracking, we realized like, this is like everything that I've wanted to do forever. And I just like, there's no way at this point I can ever go back. I have to give this 100. Like I got to a point where like, I'm willing to die for this, clearly. Like literally, I would put everything on the line. Like doing what I did, I put all my businesses, all my reputation, everything on the line for that. And I don't want to get to a point in my life where I look back on this and go, you didn't give 100. And like 100, when I say 100, like I mean 100. So this will either be successful or not. Like there's literally no option. Like I'm either gonna die or it's gonna be successful.
So all right, and I mean I appreciate the passion. Yeah. I really do. Yeah. I appreciate the passion, and I appreciate the level of thoughtfulness that went into all of this. Yeah. But I mean, even before we get into I debated about this the whole way over here. Was I gonna? Because I'm an observer, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I'm a guy that walks around and I watch stuff, and I don't necessarily know that it's my place to put my opinions on this stuff. Yeah. But I think I have the same opinion of this as most of the public has, and it's like, wow, I really admire like the motivation and the gumption, and boy, is it the dumbest fucking thing I've ever
Yeah.
heard in my life.
Yeah.
Like in like even in business, and I think when I first saw it,
Yep.
before I knew it was you, before I
Yeah.
knew, it's like once it came out that it was you, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I know that fucking guy. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
So but like even before your name had been released or whatever, I think the post that I put up is as this is both brilliant and
And
stupid.
stupid, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you have to, if you're intellectually honest, you have to look at that side. And I'm not naive enough to think that going into that wasn't there like there was huge risk.
Hmm.
And to yes, not knowing the long term plan of like the investment into this, of like where my headspace is at in terms of seeing this thing through to completion. Yeah, it would be easy to look at it as yeah, that was like kind of dumb or like whatever if you didn't look at the risks. And so the nice thing is with having people around me um, that knew about it beforehand and like knew what I was planning to do. The people that I know love me and care about me wanted to know that I understood the risks and was I comfortable acknowledging the risks and following through on the potential that those could have been consequences. And so my whole basis for the idea itself was what could I do that doesn't directly hurt anybody else and puts me at the most point of risk and but it's still the craziest thing that's like back when you I don't know, I look back at like bands from like I wasn't around in this time, but like 60s and 70s and like just the music industry now, it just seemed very consistent with how everybody goes about doing things. And it's about like it was more or less like I look at most of my life as like an experiment. Like it's just you're going through things you haven't been there before in most places, and I think I'm honest enough to realize I don't have much figured out. Like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Hmm.
And so I think that's the beauty of learning and like the beauty of being a student of life. And so yeah, for me, it was what was the craziest thing that I could do that was just like had the potential to expedite a few years of time of like slugging it out. And also that's just like that I thought was like a crazy cool thing. Now, that being said, I would not recommend it to anybody. I wouldn't because I don't think anybody was in a position to do like I had a very unique position where I wasn't married to anybody at the time of doing it. Well, now obviously, and I had liquidated a lot of like my assets here in Windsor. I had the ability to have a project that had potential benefit of doing something like that. So like there was a lot of calculation that went into it. It wasn't like, hey, I'm gonna climb the bridge and see what happens.
No, and that's the thing. I don't for a second think that this was a whim.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that I appreciate. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that anybody who sees this thinks that you just got bored and decided to climb the bridge.
Yeah.
There was obviously some thought that was put in behind it. It's just I wonder because ultimately, look, I'm a punk rock kid from way back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Gavin Booth, who was on the show recently, like made his bones being like the shit disturber of
Right.
this city, and I was right beside him the entire time.
Yeah.
And so like there's a level of all of that that I appreciate. I'm in media, I'm in
Right.
entertainment. I get the idea that you kind of have to create a spectacle
Sure.
to stand out. I
Yeah.
understand all of that stuff. But then you wrap it around and sorry
Yeah.
if this comes out
No.
judgmental. And
No. Absolutely.
I don't mean it like that. But
Yeah.
like the first thing that I saw, I went like, okay, it's got all of the sparks that I like.
Yep.
I question it because like there's no music involved with the music promotion, so there's
Yep.
always that like, all right, what are we doing? But then I come to your page, and the thing that you're pushing around all of this is this narcissist brand.
Ah, interesting that you say that.
So that sort of it's kind of that part that I went
Yeah.
like, all right,
Yeah.
like because
it's interesting because the narcissist thing is it's a play on. It's not to be a brand. It's the fact that it's looking at global. It's two parts. There's a global aspect of it, which is our society today. So it's kind of like a jab at that in the sense of we are narcissistic. Like our society has, and I think people get broadly labeled as narcissists when you might have narcissistic traits and things that come through like that, which can be positive to some regard where you have somebody who's driven and somebody who is like focused on a goal and they're willing to get there at despite the cost. You read all the amazing biographies of these people that started these Fortune 500 companies and these crazy art projects that blow up. A lot of them carry those traits by definition of narcissists. our society is very narcissistic in the sense that we objectify self as elevated, very much so. And so a lot of it was that. And then also at the time of when I was going through my personal things on the relationship side, there were people that had labeled me as a narcissist. And I would go to therapy and asking people, am I this, am I that? And the resounding majority was, no, you're not at all. And so part of that was when I released Who We Are, which was the single before Crossfire. We released it a week before. It got nobody gave a fuck about it, to be honest with you. And the reality was those lyrics, if you listen to the lyrics, it's the idea of somebody who has hurt people in the past, is trying to figure out life and trying to figure out the way to like back home, and in the sense of like a home being like a place of goodness and purity, and in the sense of like being good to humanity. And the narcissist concept for that, I was like, what can I just do that's shocking as cover art? Honestly, that was the big thing. What can I write? It's like One Tree Hill when she writes fucking slut across her thing. It's like owning the labels that people give you and just being like, look, if you want to view me as that and you don't want to know the backstory, then fuck off. Like, I'll write it on my shirt and I'll stand at the top of a building and I'll just put it on it. And so that was the idea behind that. So it was interesting because at first I was like, I don't know what I want to wear up there, because it wasn't, Who We Are was no longer being promoted. Originally the plan was to release Who We Are on the day of the bridge climb and then come out with Crossfire a few days later using the like media that we'd capture from the bridge thing. And but we'd already released Who We Are. And to touch on your point about the idea of doing the bridge and there was no music, that really sucked because, and the guys at 89X, Mark and Chris, they were like, don't you think like, do you feel like the project's getting lost in the idea of the bridge thing and the bridges, whatever? And I was like, yeah, it does. And it sucks because all the Canadian media explicitly, they will write, if you read through all the articles, we're refusing to name the band, we're refusing to give them the promotion that they're looking for. Nar City did this thing. Big post. It was on their main page and it was on their Instagram. It got, I think, over 100,000 views, close to 100,000, if not over. And I was sending people over there because they wouldn't quote the project. And their headline was, Windsor musician climbs the Ambassador Bridge. That's so metal. So like they're praising it in a way, but they wouldn't link anything. They wouldn't say 1988. They wouldn't say Crossfire. They wouldn't do anything. And I was sending people over from Instagram like, hey guys, can you support us? Go over there, just comment like crazy. And I think like 60 people went over, and like the whole thing is just a feed of how you guys need to tag 1988, tag 1988. So the next day, and they're obviously seeing this in the office. They're not dumb. They have a whole hundreds of editors there. And so the next day, I get a message from them. Oh, we're so sorry. It was an honest mistake. We didn't know the project, and we've added it now. I'm like, thank you. I was so nice about it. I was like, thank you guys so much. I appreciate the opportunity for you guys to share it out. But I'm like, fuck. Like on the end, like, fuck. Like, you guys, you know that you didn't put the project. You specifically didn't put it. And it just sucks because they have no ties as to why they need to cater to like the Ambassador Bridge, or, you know, it's political. It's just political bullshit at the end of the day. And that sucked because it got lost. And the stateside pumped it. Stateside was like Crossfire, 1988, this and that, Fox News Channel, every Canadian thing with the exception of 89X, you, and one or two others.
Oh, I didn't say I was going to tag you.
Oh, yeah. Lucas Heney, media guy, bridge guy, just fucking delete all 1988. And so that just, it sucked, and it was unfortunate.
Well, it's funny because I think I had a feeling coming into this, despite the fact that I was kind of like, I had my sort of hackles up. I had a feeling that I would sort of appreciate what you had to say behind it. And I do, by the way. Because I do appreciate the fact that, like, say what you will about however you feel about climbing the bridge and all that stuff. I like that you did put the thought behind it. I like that you, like, all of these pieces that I have questions for you actually have thought behind it. It's not, so I'll give you that. Ultimately, I'm an artist, and I don't give a fuck about, like, I don't, Dano O'Shea from My Son the Hurricane said it best. I don't need to like your music.
Right.
You're not writing music for me.
Right.
But I do want to know, as an artist, are you an artist or are you a piece of shit?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And it comes off to me that at least there's some thoughtfulness in all of that. But beyond all of that, what I do like is the wrong word, because it irritates me so much, but not at you.
I'm intrigued.
What
now.
I admire most about your project is it points something out to people who are aware that I think really needs to be focused on. And I think what stood out to me most is that every single piece of media that I saw that had anything to do with this project was handed to them by you. And that to me, the fact that the general public does not understand and hold on to that drives me insane. And you put such a bullseye on that I honestly have not seen put on since Gavin did his initial push for FU Windsor. And the difference is when Gavin did that, everybody was pissed off because Gavin put a point on it and went like, haha, look, you put a point on it and they don't even realize that you did it. Talk to me about that.
There was a lot of thought that went behind that. Well, I obviously got arrested at the bottom. And I was,
Ish.
Yeah. It's funny. I knew 3 of the 4 arresting officers.
See, this is the part that I already knew.
So
can you talk?
I can and I won't. I know what I probably can and can't say. The reality is, I hold the police in highest regard. My grandfather was on the force. We have had the opportunity to service Windsor Police in a media capacity, and the week earlier, I was actually in there with direct contact to the arresting officer. And so, gem of a guy. Honestly, I love the Windsor Police. They've done nothing but good things for me. And everybody, rips on police until they need them. So it's one of those things.
100%.
And so, anyways, I knew 3 of the 4 arresting officers. And when I got to the bottom, there was no indication that I was even being charged. They were unsure of what was happening. And to clarify, because all the news agencies got this wrong, I did not tie up resources. There was no one on scene when I got to the bottom. And I had to wait there, and I chose to wait there. Like I could have been non-compliant. I could have just hopped in my Jeep and drove home, and they would have found me, later on and processed me there. But the reality is, it was a very quiet Saturday morning, obviously, because no one saw me up there. And the reality is, 5 cruisers ended up showing up, but only 1 was called, and the 5 came because they wanted to see who climbed the bridge. So they were intrigued. And so the 3 of the 4 arresting officers chatted with me for a while. I asked, I had my bag there. I said, can I open it up and eat something because I'm starving? And so we chatted about my shoes that I wore, why I chose the shoes, what the band was. They asked if I had a Spotify. Gave them a link to the project. And then they found out they were charging me with a mischief under charge. And from there, it was just protocol.
Right.
So, but then to talk to the media side of that was I was in at the headquarters for about 3 hours, and I got released. The first thing I did was, when I got released, I got back on Instagram, shouted out, gave praise to Windsor Police for handling their job great. And then I came back to the studio, and I was like, we got to get media dumped out quick.
Right, because when we say we got to get media dumped out, let's talk about all of the things that were so you had drones up there, number one.
Yeah, so I'm not licensed to operate the drone. I don't have a drone license, so I was not flying the drone. The person who's flying the drone has asked to be unnamed because obviously
there's
the project is whatever. So the reality was there was drone footage that was delivered off to me, and then I had we were tracking some new songs that are coming out shortly here. So I had a bunch of footage of us tracking earlier that week. So I had that footage, and I made a mashup of the drone footage with the bridge and just some general promotion for Crossfire. And so I came back within an hour. I put a 20-second promotional. Yeah, actually, Nikita's in a lot of that media too. She made the news quite a bit.
Hey, puppy.
But so I dumped that media out to the news outlets as soon as possible. I made a Google Drive folder and I just sent it out and I said, here you go. And so they had this 20-second thing that I had full control over, and all of them used it. But you know what sucks about that too is the news channels that used it. They did it live, so their live broadcast, great. I go to play it back, they cut all of it, and it's because Crossfire is playing, so they're gonna have to pay me royalties.
Right.
They deleted it. It's gone. So I went to get all those network episodes. They're all gone. Like Channel 4, Fox News, ABC, all of them, CTV.
Yep.
Yeah. Crap.
But so I guess what I want to point out on all of this is exactly that, the reporting side of this.
Yeah.
The part that made all of the big spectacle.
Yeah.
right? The part that where it's newsworthy,
Yeah.
as opposed to just some sort of like, because I mean it's a
Thing.
publicity stunt,
Sure.
but they're reporting on it.
Yep.
And the fact that they do none of their own reporting now.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is before I get into
Yeah,
this.
it's huge.
I don't want to shit on the amazing men and women that actually do reporting and are still involved. The business itself sucks.
Yeah.
The entire business has changed, and it's like your stunt or whatever.
Yeah.
I think puts a point on that.
Yeah, 30 articles that are all the same shit.
Yep.
The only one that did really great was AM800 was awesome. Detroit Free Press did a good job. They actually did some, and then Dawson. I've never met Dawson.
Dawson's great.
He probably thinks that article he wrote was like really negative, but I pumped it as positive because he did his research, and he was the only person that called out the narcissist thing. He was the only person that actually looked through the Instagram post and got specific facts that were different than everybody else.
And what was it that he pulled out that you appreciated?
The fact that so the whole first half of the article is super negative, which everyone only reads the first half, so that was whatever. But then he went on to talk about like how, the things I said at top of the bridge, this is the craziest shit I've ever seen. Nobody else is out there doing crazy stuff like this. If this doesn't deserve a follow, I don't know what does. So go like the page, follow the page. And then I don't think he linked specifically, but he did pull a photo off the Instagram account for 1988, and it was there, so you had the option to go at least look at 1988's page. So there was that. So he did a good job overall, and I shouted him out too. I was like, "Thanks so much, man." Whatever. He never reached out to me for anything.
No, Dawson's actually a great guy.
Yeah,
he's
cool.
been reporting in entertainment in this city
for a while. Okay.
Oh yeah. Like he reported on like my first art show back in.
Oh really? Oh no way.
Yeah.
So, he seemed like amazing. I give him nothing but praise.
Oh no, he's a great guy, and he actually does his work, and that's why I say when I go down this road, I don't want to. I'm not trying to slam the people that actually do the work. I'm mostly slamming the business and the idea that like they don't fund enough reporters to actually go out and cover these stories, so that when there is a story that comes out like this, that's all they're doing. They're taking the stuff that I wonder, had you not sent them,
it would have been nothing.
Would it even have made the news?
No, and that's why I knew it was imperative. The fact that I took a leap of faith, well, without the leap part, I took a step, I took a climb of faith.
There you go.
Up to the top of the bridge. And if I did that and it didn't get any type of traction at all, that would have been really disheartening. And it is kind of disheartening because I thought it would have got more. Like
that was actually my next question.
Yeah, so I thought it would have got more. And even if what had been shared out, it was at least mentioned about the project, it would have gained more traction. But there was a deliberate effort from every major news agency on the Canadian side to shut it down and make sure everybody knew it was a terrible idea, which I agree, terrible idea. In terms of if you do not, like I calculated from the banner, like I made sure the printer had a mesh banner that wind was just going to flow right through that sucker so that it would not fly off the bridge. In fact, when I tethered it onto the bridge, I had a safety from the backpack, a safety onto the banner. I put the banner on and then I removed the safety. So like there was a lot of work going into making sure that people's lives were not at risk with that.
Except the part where if you missed a step.
Mine. Yeah, mine. And that's the other thing, like where I chose to climb up, if I was to fall, I do not fall onto the bridge.
Right.
Like when I'm climbing those suspension components, which is funny because a lot of people don't know that I'm afraid of heights. Terrified.
It's I've spent quite a bit of time on that bridge.
Yeah.
Truck driver.
Yeah, of course.
Crossed it plenty of time.
Yeah.
I made some life decisions on that bridge.
Did you?
Anyway.
It's iconic. It's an amazing bridge.
But climbing those railing, and I mean that was a thing that we talked about as a kid. Yeah. About like you realize it's somebody's job to climb that thing and change those light bulbs.
Yeah.
Right.
That was what was crazy is people were messaging me like they were a lot older than me, and they're going, "That's awesome! I've always thought about doing that." And then I got one guy that was like, one time after a U2 concert, there's another bridge in Detroit that they were leaving, or like just outside. And he's like, yeah, our band climbed up there and we hung this banner off it, whatever, back in the, I guess 80s or 90s. And so it's one of those things that like so many people, I'd say 98% positivity overall. Okay. 2% negative on my back end of messages.
But do you think the negativity, I wonder how to ask this question because like there's a lot of shit talking.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So how much, and does it even matter How much do you think there is behind the scenes sort of like just shit talking?
Oh, I think I love the idea of just trolling. Like I look at life as an experiment. I really, at this point in my life and the decisions I made and everything I've gone through personally, whatever, I'm just excited to be here, and I'm excited for the opportunity to get to live my life.
Right.
And so people are gonna, you're only based off your perspective. So if people either have a tendency to look at things immediately as a positive or immediately as a negative, and it's just a product of how you've wired your brain, honestly. And so, if people jump to a negative right away, then, maybe they have family that works on the bridge and things are a lot different now in the security side of things.
Right.
And people there, I don't think it was a great Monday morning conference meeting over at the bridge that morning, because they realized a lot of flaws at the bridge. In fact, somebody's up there for 3.5 hours. Luckily, and the police have this on record of me coming down and going, well, we know it wasn't malicious intent. Well, yeah, it wasn't. And imagine it was somebody that had malicious intent. They had free reign to walk up there. So I think I exposed a big flaw. So when people are negative about that, I don't know if you looked at the Windsor Star article that Dawson had wrote on the Facebook page, but there were about 200 and something comments. I think I commented on at least like 100 and something of them. Everything from I weight the positivity the same as the negativity, and to me it doesn't really matter either way.
Right.
So I always am fascinated by people that weight negativity so high but not the positivity, or they weight the positivity so high and not the negativity. It's like, either neutral all around, or you can't. And so I would comment back to everybody. Like, some of them were like, oh yeah, I heard the music's fucking terrible. And I was like, yeah, the guitarist is like so fucking bad. Like, so you literally can't play for shit. And then he messages back. One specifically was like, oh, I actually haven't even heard the band yet. And he's like, and then he commented later, he's like, I checked out the band. It's actually pretty good songs. I'm like, I just try to troll everybody. Any of the negative, I want 1988 to be a very interactive project overall. Every message that has come through, I've messaged everybody. There's been I think there's close to 300 DMs on the Instagram. I messaged every single person, and not just, hey, thanks, it's like, hey, conversation. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, the only reason this will ever do well is if people can relate and people can engage, and I invest back into them in some capacity. So
ultimately, what's the goal there then?
Glastonbury. Honestly, that's my dream. Like, if you want to ask my ultimate dream, like 100%, that's what it is.
Hit the festival and then you're done.
No, like, that's the thing. Where do you go from there? That's so far off to me. Like,
you're right.
Here's the other thing. This is something that I'd like to touch on, because I got asked this on a different show, and it's very like close to my heart. As a musician, I know my things that I know, but there are so many more talented. Every city is full of talented, insanely talented people. And one of the big comments, the negative comments, was, focus on the music, everything will come. That's fucking bullshit.
Such a bullshit line.
I honestly, like, I can't, it's like, that to me is the definition of just stupidity. It's like, you can put the best thing out there. And this is what is so sad to me. The best bands will never be heard. The best songs will never be heard. The best artists, you never see their work. Because it all comes down to a large component of marketing.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, except for the part where you say they'll never be seen and heard. I think what you're doing is overvaluing popularity.
To an extent.
And
also art's subjective.
Oh, no.
Right.
100%. Yeah, no, 100%. But it's just, to me, like, there's and I mean, it's, now we're talking about different business models and stuff or whatever, but like, there's a value to me. I almost value art more that is specific. Yeah. In other words, the passion and the dedication to the piece, to the piece itself, is outweighed by what people will think of it. So what ends up happening to me with those pieces, it's the difference of, if you think about, like, you're building a company, you can build a widget. You can either build 1 million widgets and sell them for $1 each, or you can build one widget and sell it for $1 million.
Sure. Yeah.
It's kind of that concept to me.
Yeah.
And I've always, and I'm not saying one's better than the other, it's just my personal spot is, I think I tend to value that $1 million widget more.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
See, I look at art differently. I look at art as like, the most successful art to me, just my perspective on this, is the one that meets the most amount of people in terms of has the ability to affect somebody the most. And so there's some pieces of art, whether it be visual or audio or whatever, architectural, people look at, and a handful of people are just like, that isn't unreal, and they're willing to pay And that's kind of where, like, when it comes to what I would like at the end of my life to look back at is what have I done that has met the most amount of people. And so that's my perspective on that. And again, that's different for everybody. I know some artists that are like, no, they don't want to do that. And that is their art. The fact that they're so exclusive and selective and niche, that's what's beautiful about it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas then you have others that are the opposite. And I think it's just art. Art's fucking amazing because it is what it is. Like,
I mean, ultimately, for me, if so long as you're making your audience, whoever that is,
Mhm.
think,
Right.
engage.
Mhm.
What I do, and it's ultimately where I landed on my way over here. What I think I like about you in this scenario is that it doesn't fucking matter if I like you climbing the bridge or if I think it's a good idea or not. What matters is me and 100,000 other fucking people spent at least a little portion of their day going, huh.
Yeah.
And that's more than I think you can ask for from a lot of things.
100%.
And I think that's ultimately where I fell before I got here. I'm just glad that after this conversation, I still feel that.
Yeah. I'm not some crazy whack job that's like, yeah, this is what I'm entitled for this, and that's the thing. I knew the action of what I was doing would come across some people as being the biggest douchebag in the world.
That's definitely a word. That's definitely
100%.
the word that I've said
Yep.
and heard thrown around.
I bet there is. And the reality is that's where, for me, looking at this long term is like, okay, first of all, how can I dump media? So like even with that, like we started doing the vlogs, we started like engaging on Instagram. Anyone who's wanted to take the time to reach out and learn more about the project, there's opportunity to do that now. And then getting on and thank you so much for having me on shows like this because it gets to show my heart. Like at the end of the day, I don't think I'm a douchebag. I know people think after that I would be, but the reality is there's so much more there. And I think as a society we've gotten so good at just looking at something blanket, looking at it, going and just making it a quick. It's human nature. I'm not saying it's wrong even. It's just how we operate. And so, but the reality is for the people that are wanting to learn more about the project and want to learn more about what that all encompasses, the opportunity is there. So, and that's the beauty of the world we live in today. We have access to anything we want, and to win over people's time is it's a huge honor to me that somebody would even take the time to go and listen to the song. So if that's 10 people and it changed, like I think back to moments where like were pivotal moments in my life. There was a guy that taught me how to play guitar when I was like really, really little. That was a moment that was totally like meant nothing to him probably. Never think of it again. And the reality is it meant everything to me and it changed my whole life. And so like if that thing could do that for one person, sick, then it's a win.
It's been a pleasure, man.
Thanks so much.
It's been awesome. This episode, like every other episode, has all the links to our guest and all of our amazing sponsors down below. Make sure you check those out. And of course, if there's a subscribe or like button down underneath where I'm pointing, hit those because that's what you have to do to get the word out and stuff. Not all of us can climb a bridge. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Really appreciate it.
No, anytime. That was great.